Hey folks, my name is Alex, and in this video, we're going to learn how to initialize Prisma in our project and model our database schema. Let's jump into it. In a previous video, we installed the Prisma CLI as a dev dependency. We'll now use the Prisma CLI to initialize Prisma in our project. So on your editor's terminal, ensure that you're in the API directory and then type npx prisma init. You can run the command as it is, and Prisma will set Postgres as the default database provider. However, you can provide the data source provider flag and then specify your preferred database. In our case, we'll set it as SQL Server and then run the command. Prisma init did a number of things, so let's take a step back and review exactly what it did. One of the things it did is create a .env file at the root of the API directory. And when you open the file, you'll see some lovely documentation on environment variables and connection strings that you can always refer to if you get stuck. You'll also see here that there is a database URL variable with a placeholder value to a SQL Server database. Go ahead and update that value with your Azure SQL connection string. The other thing that Prisma init did is create a Prisma folder with a schema.prisma file inside it. Now this is where all the Prisma magic will happen. The Prisma schema, or schema in short, is like the configuration file for your database. It consists of three parts: a data source, generator, and a data model definition. The data source block specifies all the details about the database that Prisma should connect to, such as the provider and the connection string of your database. The env function here will access your database URL environment variable that's specified in the .env file. Now, in case you want to switch your provider, you can update it here by setting it to whatever you'd like, for example, Postgres or MySQL, but we'll stick to SQL Server for this project. The second block is the generator. A generator specifies assets that should be created when specific Prisma commands are invoked, such as migratedev for generating migrations. Now, don't worry about this because we'll cover what migratedev does in a future video. In our case, Prisma client will be generated. Prisma Client is the library that's responsible for generating the TypeScript types based on the data model definition and creating a type-safe API for interacting with the database. And finally, the last block is the data model definition. A data model represents the entities of your application's domain. They map to tables in the case of relational databases or collections if you're using MongoDB. The data models form the foundation of assets such as the queries available in the generated Prisma Client API. If this is your first time using Prisma, you'll probably notice that your schema.prisma file has no syntax highlighting, and in the event of an error, it might be challenging to figure out where you went wrong. So let's fix it. Head over to the VS Code extension marketplace, and then search for Prisma, and install the extension called Prisma by Prisma. The extension will provide all the syntax highlighting, code completion, formatting, renaming, and linting goodness that you need when working in a schema.prisma file. Once the installation is complete, navigate back to your Prisma schema, and now you have syntax highlighting. We're all set, so let's get started modeling our schema. So as I mentioned before, a table is represented in the Prisma schema using a model. So start by defining a model called employee. Now, inside the model, we're going to define fields which have a name, a type, and an optional attribute or attribute function. Attributes and attribute functions modify the behavior of a field or a block. Now, don't worry, we'll take a look at them in just a moment. The first field is going to be employee ID that will be of a type string. Employee ID is going to be a primary key column, so go ahead and add an @ID attribute, and then an @default UUID attribute function that tells the database to generate a unique identifier using the UUID specification for each record. Next, we'll have the name field that is a string. We'll also have job role that's also a string, and then salary that's a decimal. The next one is going to be the employee registration that's an integer type. We'll also add an @unique attribute to make sure that every record created has a distinct value. Next, we'll add a created@ field that's a date time, and we'll also let the database auto-generate our timestamps using the default now function. And finally, we have an updated@ field that will also be a date time with an auto-generated timestamp for when it's created, and an @updated@ attribute that will automatically set a timestamp for when a record is last updated. So give that a save, and the schema is looking pretty good now. Now, before we call it a day, we're going to enrich our models with something called native type attributes. Native type attributes allow you to specify the underlying database type to be used when applying your schema to the database. Now, you don't have to do this because Prisma sets default native type attributes for you under the hood if you don't specify any. So let's take this a step further and define the native types ourselves. One thing you should know is that the native type attributes vary depending on your database provider you're going to use in your project. Let's now update our schema. Native type attributes begin with the @default prefix, followed by a period, and then the name of the native type attribute. For employee ID, we'll use the db.uniqueIdentifier attribute, and then we'll use the db.nvarchar with a limit of 100 characters for the name and job role fields. And then finally, we'll have a db.decimal with a maximum of 12 digits and 2 decimal digits to the right-hand side of the decimal point. And that's it. Give that another save and the Prisma extension will format your schema. So let's recap what we covered in this video. We learned how to initialize Prisma using the npx prisma init command, and then use the data source provider flag to specify our preferred provider. We then took a look at the files that the Prisma CLI created and the different components of the Prisma schema. We then installed the Prisma extension for syntax highlighting, formatting, and auto-completion. And then finally, we modeled our first table in the schema and then enriched it with native type attributes. If you'd like to learn more about the Prisma CLI, the schema, or the SQL Server connector, the links will be included down in the description. In the next module, we'll learn how to sync the schema with the database using something called migration. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.